I'm going to take this opportunity for another off Genesis video. I crave these. I get so stuck in one thing. I'm not one-dimensional. Anyway, okay, there was a comment made by somebody that I want to reply to, and I don't know how to pronounce this name. I would butcher it very badly. Shiyr Kadash. Shiyr Kadash? Shiyr Kadash. Anyway, there was a comment made on a second comment made by the individual. Abram, Psyche, hears the call and feels the urge to shift from left hemisphere beta to right hemisphere alpha frequency. And that was in reference to a video I put up on the recent video on the beginnings of the Abram and Sarai story. And I want to respond to this more in detail. I want to talk about the left and right hemisphere and try to steer people away from that and the frequency stuff. But I really want to reply because the individual made another comment that lets me know they're really onto something here. It was on another video, and it was Zeno's paradox. The map is not the territory. The menu is not the meal. The individual is understanding that there's something different in the Bible than what there is at face value, and they're pointing out specific verses indicating that. Proverbs 1, verse 6, wisdom is to understand a proverb and the interpretation, the words of the wise and their dark sayings. Now, in my interpretation, I have shifted that to 100% of the Bible. What are proverbs? What needs to be understood, every bit of it? It's all written completely in a particular cryptic style. That if you treat it that way, you can actually understand it. Then the Matthew 16:12, then understood they how he bade them not beware the leaven of bread, but the doctrine of the Pharisees and of the Sadducees. So, yeah, that's a little bit different. I think that the Pharisees don't understand what's going on and the Sadducees did. Okay. To me, it seems to be, I'm going to use some weird terms for people. The difference between the Roman Christians or the Gnostic Christians. The Gnostics were like, you know what, this is about me, turn inward. They still had it mystical, but they knew it was about them. The Christians are like, nope, take it away. It's about outward. It's not about you at all. Never, never is it about you. It's about God out there. So they've got an inversion going on. The Pharisees and the Sadducees, I see that as the same way. The Sadducees were like, this is about us. There's been groups in the past that have been smaller groups that have said, no, this is about us, not about out there. And they are not popular. They get put down. That's a different story. I'll leave that one out. But you're right. You got to there's something different. Galatians 4:24, which things are an allegory? Timothy, rightly divide the word of truth. What is truth? There's a bunch more that goes on there. So I look at this and go, okay, the individual understands something, and I see what rabbit holes, I see where they are, and I want to reply to some things because I think this is very helpful, and you're really hooking into it. I appreciate that. I've gone down that rabbit hole. My name is Dan Paulson. Welcome to the video. So I was talking to a friend of mine probably a couple of years ago who came up with the same thing. And so we've had some discussion with it. I'm not going to get into the left-right brain hemisphere thing. I'm not a brain person. It's not my field. But I understand that there's something specific there. However, that's more recent knowledge and more recent understanding. And the way the brain works, that there's a left and right hemisphere issue with what's happening. But ultimately, in the material, there's a mental hierarchy that we have to maintain in order to interact with it. And in order to identify that mental hierarchy, we have to take a look at some things a little bit deeper. First of all, historically, what do we know about the brain, and when did we know about the brain? I will say that, let me look here real quick. I'm going to read something. All right, from Wikipedia, we have Alcmaeon of Croton. This is 5th century BC, an early Greek medical writer and philosopher, scientist. He has been described as one of the most eminent natural philosophers and medical theorists of antiquity. If you want to study him, you can. I'm not going to do that in this video. We'll just keep it kind of short. 5th century BCE, whatever you want to say, before Christ, before Common Era, 5th century, 500 years. He is the one who really was the one that first was dialing in the brain, and that it was the memories were here and things like that. Prior to then, it wasn't really known. They were having brain injuries. They were starting to examine it a little bit more closely instead of just letting people die or whatnot. They were, getting curious. We got knives now. Let's cut it open and see what's inside. So anyway, so that was happening 5th century BCE. Now, Gilgamesh is well, even Mesopotamian material, 1300 BCE. The template is appearing using this mental hierarchy hundreds of years before the first recorded history of humans kind of understanding that the brain is where thought even happened, where memories were up there. We didn't even understand it before then. So they're creating a template about how life works without any knowledge of the brain. They're using something different. They can't be using left and right hemisphere ideas. They can't be using anything about the brain at all. They don't know about the brain when they're making this template, but they know something different. I would say probably the easiest way they could see that you become products of your environment. Remember, we take things for granted that they've got all day long to make observations and talk. They're living through their minds. We're living through media. We got stuff coming from the outside all the time. To them, it was happening inside. We've inverted. We're not where they are. So it gets difficult, I think, to understand or grasp what they're doing and where they're coming from. But at some point in time, there's things happening like, well, we've conquested. We brought these people over here and we've killed a bunch of them, maybe taken prisoners and slaves, or somehow something like that happens. And you realize there's some people over here that look a certain way and that sound completely, they don't even speak the language. But after capture, their children were raised here and they became adults. And you know what? They sound and think exactly like we do. What the hell happened? They are not those people, are they? They are what? They are their cultural beliefs. They are their experiences. They're what they're being trained and taught. And those that are fine don't have issues. And those that are angry have got problems. They've been hurt. They've been abused. They could see that happening. And they could understand that at first there's qualities that you have. Regardless of where you come from on the planet, you're going to have a certain brain type, a certain sexual orientation, an engineer's brain, or a, gossiping brain, or a, somebody that's an adventurer, whatever. There's different brain types that we have, and we know that. Now, this might be a stretch for some people, but I'm going to suggest they knew that too. I don't know if they knew brain types, but somehow they understood there were different personalities because they put into the material that they're special called people. Even Marduk, when you get in there and read it, Marduk has like double-sized ears, 4 eyes, has more power, has more strength. Marduk, among all the others, is a different kind of an individual. Moses is saved out as a child. Jesus is saved out as a child. Jason is saved out as a child. Many are called, few are chosen. Many stand outside the narrow gate where very few will enter inside. There's always this idea that not many people are going to do it, and that is just smack dab in the material. So much so that it's glaring, that it's like, this is a rare trip. So we know that right there. The called person is going to be somebody who decides to go inward. And I'm going to say that it looks to me like after all of my... It seems to me like it's introverted feelers that have been hurt that have got the opportunity. It really filters down to a small group of people. All right, so that's in the beginning right there. We also understand that it's a mental trip, and then what happens? Buddha tells us all we are is the result of what we have thought, where it's, our lives are founded on and based in our thoughts. And what we can observe is if we look at our lives, imagine this, you could take 3 children from the outback, separate them at birth, raise one in Saudi Arabia, one in China, and one in Alabama in the Bible Belt, and let them come together after 40 years, and you'll see that where it's like, you know what? What are they? They're products of their environment, of their training, of their brain conditioning, what their beliefs are. In isolation, you would find that they had different beliefs, different convictions, different political affiliations in most cases, unless they were the person that isolated out. But if not, you're just going to find 3 different... What would you look at? Almost like an automaton. And then you have to go, that's what I am. That's what I am too. What happened along the way? That I have conscious... At first, I'm a happy kid living from my higher awareness. But as I start having memories and experiences, I start focusing my attention there, and I lose that higher awareness. In the stories, you see God disappear. You have to know why that is. That has to come from the hierarchy. You can't do left and right brain hemisphere and understand that. God leaves the picture because that's you leaving the higher awareness, beginning to live life through our mental experiences, living life of the world, and then having repeated cycles of pain, but that our inner self becomes a product of the bundle of the memories and the emotional state of them that we're storing away, that is our Eve quality. But that Eve is subservient to Adam because it's teaching us that the inner self is a product of the conscious thinking. We have to know that in order to interact with the story. The conscious is there. The inner self, when you're not paying attention and things are happening into turmoil, that's the Eve, that's the sin, that's the stuff that's cyclically emerging, the pain in childbirth that continues to emerge metaphorically. If we call it left and right hemisphere, you can't get there. Frequency, you can't get there. The brain's the alpha, all the states right there. The brain is operating with a given frequency, and probably more than we even know. I think part of our sixth sense is there. But at no point in time is the brain operating with only one frequency. It's always operating with all of them. At times it's just higher in one area than in another area. So the idea then would be to focus on a certain brain state that gives your mind a state of calmness. And that's a focus that is done that helps people feel good. Well, in this case, the shift in frequency is what? The frequency is this. I have a memory and an emotion about it that when I remember that memory, I feel hurt, I feel shame, my face turns red, I don't want to tell anybody. So something I'm anxious, I desire, somehow something just doesn't feel good when I bring up this memory. That's the frequency of the memory, and it brings you down. Alpha, beta, doesn't matter. You don't feel good. You heal from that. You find a way to resolve that within you. It's a memory and a way that you continue to perceive it, the way you attach it, the way you put yourself into the story that somehow you have to heal from, to separate from, in order to understand that you're a physical creature emerging from a sea of something out there. Find ways to mentally separate from those things. You're not hurt from it anymore. Your frequency raises. We don't even call that alpha, beta, anything like that. That's called happiness. Sadness to happiness right there. That's the change in frequency. That's the alchemical shift from changing lead to gold. It's all analogous in this way. But, okay, so I wanted to say that. That's important. I get that, and I see people that are just working at this and grabbing things and looking at stuff and finding what's there, and you're doing exactly what's right. All the information is available, and you're putting it together, and I love to see that. But this is one I've put a lot of research into, and it's like you have to interact with the steps in this material. Let's go look at Genesis real quick. I'm going to show you this. All right, I've got Genesis. I'll just use the King James Version up here. We can talk through it just fine. We're advanced class. I'm going to go down to right here where I want to start. And they were both naked, the man and his wife, and were not ashamed. And I'm going to say that represents each of us as a child that are ready to experience life but have not experienced it yet. Everything is okay. Then what happens? The serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field. Life experience and temptation. Serpent, the temptation was more subtle than any beast of the field, the serpent was more sneaky than any temptation of life, which was created. And to the inner being, he said, yeah. Okay, so this is just creating what's happening here is we're consuming, it's all spiritual. To the woman, he said, we may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the trees which are in the midst of the garden, you shall not eat. And the serpent said to the woman, you won't die, go ahead and eat it. So what this represents is that we are now going and having life experiences, and as a result of that, when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was pleasant to the eyes, and the tree was to be desired to make one wise, she took the fruit thereof and did eat, and also gave to her husband, who also did eat. This right here represents we have just gone off and started having life experiences, and we're going to pay the price for those life experiences. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil is life. We now know that there is good and bad out there. We didn't know that before. When we're kids, we did not know the difference between good and bad. Now we do. We've consumed from that tree. This is a tough one. I wish somebody was there to ask me questions sometime. What did you just say? I catch these on editing. Okay, I don't mean that kids didn't know the difference between right and wrong. What I mean is that there's an innocence at this point in time. Imagine a couple of kids sitting in a sandbox that are playing together. And one of them, both moms are sitting there, one across from the other. One of them drove up in a BMW and, she's all fancy dressed and the kid's all dressed up in very expensive clothes and things like that and playing. And on the other side is the lady that's walked over from the trailer park and she's very poor and she's got raggedy clothes on and they don't look the same at all. And as a little kid, you would look back and forth and that would mean nothing to you. You wouldn't make judgment calls on anything about the way people look, the way that you've learned about life at that point. There's a very innocence that's almost an ignorant innocence. We have to make judgment calls about certain things, but at this point in time, we have not done that. That's what I mean right here. At that point in time in our life, everything is just innocent. You might want your own stuff and you might cry and you might demand and want more cookies or something, but life itself, as far as the world goes, is pretty innocent. So we're now going off and living life, and that purity has been lost. We're open, we saw what life really was like, and that we were naked. And they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves aprons. We're covering ourselves. We're covering ourselves symbolically with, what is this, pain, shame, judgments. And they heard the voice of the Lord God walking in the garden. So we're still connected with the higher self. We're wrestling with ourselves. Where are you? I was afraid because I was naked. So yeah, this is teaching us, it's setting up what happens next. What have you done to the woman? And the woman said, the serpent beguiled me and I did eat. So the Lord God said to the serpent, because you've done this, you are cursed above all cattle and above every beast of the field. Upon the belly shall you go, and the dust shall eat all the days of your life. I don't see metaphorically how that would work. It seems more like it's just part of the story showing the serpent. The serpent cannot. It represents something that can never rise above the soil. It can never elevate up. It cannot walk. It cannot climb. It cannot. Well, it can, can't it? It represents something that can't get off the ground, that is going to be fixed to the physical. And I'll put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed, and it shall bruise her head, and it shall bruise his heel. So we're going to have difficulty with temptation. The woman is our inner self. And to the woman he said, I will greatly multiply your sorrow and your conception. What this is saying now, that you are holding on to those things, you're going to have more and more sorrow, and in sorrow you shall bring forth children. The children are from the offspring from our experiences. The children are manifestations. So this is teaching us that the sorrow you shall bring forth children. The children are what? The children are the offspring of our experiences, and they hurt every time they emerge. Every time something comes from us, it's pain. There's our cyclical pain, and your desire to be to your husband, and he shall rule over you. The inner being wants the consciousness to step in and do something. The consciousness is going to be, for a lifetime, mostly kind of chicken shit. I don't want to do it. I'm afraid. I'm scared. I don't want. It hurts. I need to heal this, but it's too bothersome. Okay, the husband, the conscious is the one that makes the call. The inner self, Eve, has no choice. She's along for the ride. And she will act out when the husband is not. What this means, when you're sitting there quietly and you consciously don't want to feel bad, you can have just things acting out in your mind. There it is. In pain and sorrow you shall bring forth children. Screaming, yelling, all of that. Okay. And unto Adam he said, because you have listened to the voice of your wife, that's because you are now having the experience from within, and you have eaten of the tree which I said you shall not eat. Cursed is the ground. We're going to live a physical life. In sorrow you shall eat of it all the days of your life. So God is telling us right here, this is the higher awareness telling us, you're going to go off now and have physical experiences. And they're not going to be good. Thorns and thistles are going to come from the garden of your life experiences, and you're going to eat from those experiences. There's cause and effect again. In the sweat of your face you shall eat bread till you return to the ground, for out of it you are taken, for dust you are, and dust you shall return. You're just going to live and die. And unto Adam called his wife Eve, because she was the mother of all living. And unto Adam, see, the inner being is the mother to all living, everything that is inside of us. Naming is the origin of the 10,000 things. Lao Tzu, and Adam called his wife's name Eve because she was the mother of all living. Different styles, same teaching. And unto Adam, his wife, the Lord God made coats of skin and clothed them. So we're putting clothes on. This is not good. We don't want skins and clothes. We want to be naked. This is a spiritual teaching. This is going bad in life is what this represents for us. And now that we know, we get kicked out of the Garden of Eden right here, which means we've lost our happiness. And then we've got the Adam and Eve story, which represents the idea that we're going to divide. Then we've got some numbering puzzle stuff going on I'll just leave out. Then there's a lineage, which means time goes by. Lots of time goes by. And after lots of time goes by, you finally want to turn inward because it's gone bad. And it came to pass when men began to multiply in the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them. That is the qualities that we have internally. Offspring is from within us, are our inner qualities. And those inner qualities were nice, good, fair. We were trusting. We were loving. We didn't judge. And they took wives of all which they choose, the sons of God, the experiences of life. And what happened? We became corrupted in them, and giants were in those days and after that. So this represents now we're acting out, hurt, screaming, yelling, or crying, not knowing what to do, despair. Those are the Nephilim. They're still here today. And God saw the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was evil only continually. This is us, the higher awareness. God, that's who God is. God has not been around this entire time. After God left Cain and Abel and split, all that time goes by. God is not here until it's time to destroy things. That's the return of us reconnecting to the higher awareness. The destruction happens, and what do we get here? 7 is a purging happening. Okay, so if you follow my other work, you'll know those numbers are critical. I'll avoid it here. Okay, so it's very important when you're doing this to maintain that mental hierarchy and not get into the hemisphere thing. The hemisphere is a true thing. There's something going on medically with it, but it has nothing to do with the antiquity of this material or what they were developing through observation, understanding that there was that part that you live from that goes, I feel different from here than when I'm caught up living in the memories. You can live from the higher awareness, or you can live through the memories. The consciousness is the one that's the go-between. And you know what? I mean, it's a go-between between the consciousness is how we experience life. The consciousness has all of the emotions, the feelings, the judgments, the 5 senses, the 6 senses, actually. We're just not aware of where that 6th one comes in from, so it looks mysterious. But the conscious is everything. But the conscious has to be aware enough to know that that's what's happening, that it is experiencing life getting bounced around if it's not paying attention and trying to self-observe and get into the driver's seat and to resolve the things that, because through no fault of our own where we came from, we've accumulated along the way, regardless of what it is. And the consciousness has to make the choice about what to do. The consciousness was not aware of that all throughout life as we were experiencing the pain from the inner being, living off the land, which means we're living life experiences unaware that we're just, God damn it, it keeps happening. Why is this? We're just doing the same thing. We're consuming what we're eating. We're eating of the plants of the ground. And not until we get to a point where the destruction happens, that's symbolic of us. Noah is us being called, turning inward and saying, you know what, it's time to drown that out. I'm going to wipe it out. So it remains mentally interactive that way, but you have to interpret it that way. But you also have to understand this. That's the template, the human life template, and the story is made on that right there specifically. So when you understand what they were doing, then this becomes easier to interpret from the material standpoint. But my other friend, I told him too, I was like, you cannot, if you use left brain, right brain, you cannot interact with the teaching of the material, which is written in story format that's very old. very old, 5,000 years old, in a mental hierarchy that also reflected what was happening in their culture. So somehow it would travel very readily in the culture. At the same time, that whole male in charge of the female, that's what was happening. It still is today, isn't it? It's a hold on to this. But in the mind, on the template, there's the higher awareness, the consciousness, the memories, and all of the memories are the offspring. Are they good or are they bad? That's how it's held. If you perceive it that way, suddenly the material, when you interpret it, becomes mentally interactive. All right. I know this was unsolicited, but I was eager to do that. Hope it helps. Good luck. All right. Talk to you later.